Welcome to this week's mindset video. I'm glad you're with me. This week, we're talking about safety. For one of your social emotional objectives this week, we have a safety focus and talking to your child about different scenarios that can potentially happen and how they can stay safe. We give you some ideas for different topics that you might want to choose to start out this objective, but I wanted to go in this video into a little more depth as to the how and why to go about talking about safety with your little children. First, I want to acknowledge that this topic can be stressful, not just for little children, but also for us parents. We don't even want to think about all of the potential dangers that are out there. Yet it's important, obviously, for us as parents to address these topics, to make sure we're taking all the appropriate steps to keep our children safe. And part of that is to gradually educate our children about how they can keep themselves safe. But this is a very personal and individualized topic that different children react to very differently based on their personalities and based on their ages. And the number one thing to keep in mind is that you don't want to traumatize your child with these conversations. So it's important to be really in tune to your individual child and what kind of topics they're ready to address and which ones they aren't yet. It is okay to wait on certain topics if you feel like they're overly upsetting to discuss with your child. Like, for instance, potentially talking about strangers is one of them that sometimes children have a reaction to. It's just a subject that, stranger danger is sometimes a subject that little children just don't even want to entertain, and trying to force the topic can be very difficult and even traumatic for them, and then that can result in the opposite of what we're looking for. When we talk to our children about these things, we're looking for them to become informed and educated and empowered to make correct decisions. But if they're overwhelmed with the topic and scared by it, then all they're getting is frustration about it. It can make them fearful of situations where they shouldn't be, and it doesn't take those desired steps of making them more empowered children. So you need to gauge carefully what subjects your child may be willing to broach and which ones they're not, and start out with some safety topics that seem sort of easy and accessible to your child. They could be things like being safe in the kitchen, not touching the stove or knives and things of that nature. You might decide to talk about, fire safety in your home, and maybe, some children might find it fun to practice a family fire drill. And what do you do if you smell smoke? How do we leave the house? And do we have a meeting place outside the house to meet? Things like that. How to call 911, and under what circumstances might you do that? So really just, be in tune with your child as you begin to pick these topics and approach them with your child, and start out very gently and just see how they react. Some children are going to have a little bit of a reaction to these topics, but if you stay positive and empowering, sometimes these can even be really fun for your child because they do feel empowered. Some children like to role play these situations with you and really feel like they know what they should do. And sometimes they have a really positive reaction of gaining security and confidence from knowing what they should do in an emergency situation, or knowing how to keep themselves safe. But if your child does have, a little bit of a fearful reaction or more of an emotional reaction to these topics, just back off of those for a while. There's a lot of really easy things that you can incorporate, like just simply always making it a rule for everybody to buckle up in the car and always wear your bicycle helmet. You could start off with things that are really non-threatening, like that. Or for instance, just teaching them to memorize your telephone number, for instance. That can just be a fun memorization game where they don't even realize that that is a safety issue. So you can always start out with little things like that and then work your way up to some of the bigger conversations later. Another thing to keep in mind is that before you approach any topic, we give you lots of ideas for different situations to talk about with your child, but it's up to you to pick which ones you're going to approach. And before you approach any of those topics with your child, it is important to at least brush up, do some research, make sure you have the most recent and best information about how to talk to your child about these topics and what information you should be giving them that's appropriate for their age. Just because sometimes these things do change. I mean, a really great example of that is back a generation or two ago, we were all told as little kids, don't talk to strangers. Now that's considered poor, if not potentially even detrimental advice to give to young children. The thought process behind how you should teach children to be safe around strangers is very different from what it was certainly when I grew up, but going back a little bit before that. So it is important to get the most recent information. Make sure that when you pick your topics, you just take a little bit of time to look into that and make sure you're giving really good, solid advice based on the latest child psychology, and that you have the most up-to-date information to pass on to your children. This, again, it really helps them to feel empowered when they begin to acquire some of these skills. So hopefully over time, you will see the effect of a more confident and resilient child, and that it will also make you feel more at ease, especially, as they go off to kindergarten, that they know what to do in different situations. This is definitely not a topic to be accomplished all in 1 week, or even a month, or even a year. This, instead, you should look at this week's objective as the beginning of a habit of making safety conversations a regular event in your home. Whether it's approaching new conversations, that will continue to come up. You may teach your child all of the safety rules that they should know when they're a preschooler, but as we know, as our children grow and they go out in the world and they encounter more and more different situations, more and more safety topics are going to need to be approached then as well. But also you're going to want to check in with the old topics and make sure that they remember what to do. Make sure that, again, that you have the most up-to-date information and just review those. So this week should be the beginning of that habit, of regular safety conversations with your child. And make it a conversation. It's not just a lecture to your child about what to do, but really involve them in it, make them feel like a participant, not only in the conversation, but in whatever activities you have to go along with it, whether it's a little game or a role-playing event, to where they're invested and involved and part of it. You can involve them in making your family's emergency plan. And just the more that they feel involved as a part of it, the more likely they are to have a positive response to the subject. So that is your advice for this week, and I'll see you back next time.